Hi, I'm Tony Russo, host of Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, and editor of the newsletter Funeral Service Insider, here with a bonus episode, Brief Introduction, where we speak with funeral service professionals about their job and the industry at large. This week, we are speaking with Kevon McKay. He is the Director of Cremation Recycling at Mid-States Recycling and Refining, and we're going to talk about the different things that people ask him as he introduces them or helps guide them through the process of making sure that everything that is recyclable gets recycled. He will be speaking at our upcoming event. It is a virtual event. It is called Cremation Innovations. It's set for May 20th, and there will be a link in the show notes for you to register. But right now, let's get into it with Kevon. So before we talk about your presentation, let's talk about how you got to where you are now. What brought you into this business and what keeps you there?
Yeah, so it started in 2001. I was actually bartending for somebody who had been in the precious metal recycling field, specifically for silver from film. I knew nothing about that at all, and he just thought I had that personality for sales. And before that point, I had done sales, so he must have picked up on that. And he asked if I wanted to try it, marketing directly to dental laboratories, and I said sure. And so that's where I got my start was dental laboratories, and that was for probably about 6 years, dabbling a little bit in pawn shops and dentists specifically. And then in about 2007, I decided to go off on my own with a friend, and we started a company. And at that point, the shift for dental labs to actually kind of start closing little by little because of new technology. I started marketing directly to dentists. So I'd really gotten a good feel for not only how production of dental prosthetics was made, or were made rather, and then also how they're used and needing to be replaced from a dental office perspective. And then about 2014, I started to look into crematories, realizing that there seemed to be a need for it there as well. And then from then, I pretty much went exclusively marketing directly to crematories only.
And so when you started at the time, I guess you saw that there were crematories that were missing opportunities. Is that how you kind of decided, hey, there's some education as well that needs to be done in crematories?
Starting, as I said, 2014, looking into it, I was still working for somebody else, but largely on my own. And then the company that I now work for and have for the last 9 years was actually where I would sell all the metal to, ultimately. And I went to ownership group here in 2016 and said, we really need to market to the crematories, and I think we should do it together, because what I had seen was it was basically just all middlemen. There was no actual recycling company. And crematory owners were really uneducated for sure, and had no basis for, understanding it, because this just wasn't a part of what they learned in mortuary school, for instance. So what they really needed was a heavy dose of education supported by things like an actual recycling facility, and showing, hey, this is what we mean by recycling this metal, and what metals are we talking about, and why these are worth so much, and why these really aren't worth much at all. And I knew that we'd be able to achieve that by sort of joining forces, so to speak. So I started working here January 1st, 2017. We spent the majority of the time at that point, writing articles, going to a lot of meetings, presenting as often as possible to really just sort of educate as many crematory owners as we could. And we continue to do that, because I would say then recycling wasn't nearly as mainstream as it is today. It wasn't uncommon at all to encounter somebody who'd never really thought about it, or knew about it vaguely but didn't do anything about it. Whereas today, I'm surprised when I encounter somebody who doesn't have any sort of program at all.
And so what are some of the common questions you got at the time, or even that you still get? Like, are there questions that you're going to have to answer at the end of every presentation?
Yeah, so instinctively, people would say, how do you compare to your competitors, right? I mean, that's how I think we all want to, know these kinds of things, certainly in service related professions. So to kind of further answer the question that you had asked is, what do we encounter most? Well, today, it's not so much that they don't have a program in place, meaning they already have a recycler they send it to. They might have heard word of mouth about using us, for instance, or they may have seen a webinar like the one that's upcoming or read an article, or they just had an overall sort of sense that they weren't maximizing what they could be getting out of their recycling. So they're kind of shopping around. What I love to do is kind of touch on things that they wouldn't have thought to ask. Because again, even, as I said, 10 years ago, most people weren't really even talking about it at all. It was not mainstream. Whereas today, even though it's mainstream, conceptually, they might get in a broad sense of what it is, but they don't know the particulars of what to ask. So I like to break it down into 4 categories that are going to make for a successful recycling program, all of which are equally as important, sort of like 4 tires on your car, and break it down to them in that way. So to me, it really simplifies the things that they should be looking at. And then from there, I can elaborate on sort of each one to kind of help them get an even bigger understanding.
Excellent. And what do you hope that people can take away from your presentation, or just in general when you do presentation? What's your end game goal?
Well, I think it's education. This is I can do a presentation that's 10 minutes. I can do one that's over an hour, and it really is dependent on how involved I want to get in explaining the whole process. One of the things that we preach as a company is transparency, and that's multi-layered. One of those things is allowing people to come in, whether it's a prospective client or it's a current client. We want them to have the ability to not only come in, but to walk the floor, give a tour, actually see their metal get processed, which would be to get smelted, sampled, and then analyzed. When they do that, we feel as if they get a really good understanding of what's involved, and they walk away from it feeling way more confident. So since we're not doing that, as a sort of live tour, trying to give the listeners as good an understanding as they can possibly get on sort of start to finish. Why do you have these metals in your crematory? What are the different types of metals? How are they processed differently, and why? And then what does that process look like? What does it look like to actually melt metal? And what does it look like to sample it? What is an assay? Most people don't understand what an assay is. We have our own assay lab here. Assay is just analyzing the metal to determine its elemental composition. That's how we're able to determine precisely what's contained in what was once scrap. And then just to answer, some questions about, hey, what are some things I should be looking for in the recycler that I use? What are some questions I should be asking? So really just sort of, giving them a real big look behind the curtain, not just a peek behind the curtain.
That's fantastic. And that is all I have for you, unless you have something else for me. Is there something I should have asked that didn't, or something you thought you'd get the opportunity to say, but I didn't provide it?
No, I think you have some great questions, and I think it'll be very informative for those who tune in.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
You got it. Thank you.
Brief Introduction is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please make sure, if this is the first time you're listening, that you subscribe. We have a great show that comes out every Friday called In Case You Missed It. And every other week we have a deep dive podcast called Funeral Service Insider. And we will check in with you on Friday.